Welcome back, riders. A couple of weeks ago, I returned from my big 2024 roller coaster trip across the United Kingdom and Poland. I filmed a bunch of short videos for YouTube Shorts. I've already started posting some of those if you've already seen them. But I did not film any vlogs or any long form videos during the trip, and I want to recap the trip in some kind of way, so making this mini series is how I've decided to do it. In this mini series, I plan on going from park to park and ranking all of the roller coasters I rode, and then at the end of each park video, I'll share any other rides I went on and any other overall thoughts about the park. I'll be going in the order I visited the parks, so this episode 1 will cover Thorpe Park in Chertsey, Surrey, and the United Kingdom on the outskirts of London. One more thing before I start the roller coaster ranking. Before the trip, I made a preview video where I ranked each coaster of the trip park by park and a combined list. If you want to hear my thoughts before I rode each of these coasters, go ahead and check out that video. Throughout the series, I will have whether each coaster went up, down, or unchanged compared to my previous rankings to the bottom right of the screen. Without further ado, let's begin. Coming in last is Flying Fish, a mock rides powered coaster. Of course, it should not be a surprise that the least thrilling coaster in the park places last, but that doesn't mean that I did not enjoy it. Honestly, for what it is, I liked Flying Fish. There was one moment in the ride where, at least we were sitting in the back, it tossed you around a little bit, which caught me off guard. And maybe that's due to the fact that the train is comically long, which in itself I always like long trains for whatever reason, so that was cool. Flying Fish also has some decent theming. They went with like this surfing theme with like the automated spiels playing the part, and the station it has like music and sound effects, so overall Flying Fish was a thumbs up for me. Next up is Walking Dead The Ride, an indoor Vekoma coaster at 7th place. Honestly, this coaster was a little forgettable. Maybe it's because I know nothing about The Walking Dead, so it didn't really resonate with me, but it just wasn't that memorable to me. There is a pre-show, which I appreciated somewhat, but to me it was a bit basic and unoriginal. The ride itself isn't bad or anything, but like I said, just not memorable. The theming is okay, could be better, could be worse. There was one moment in the ride which I liked, which I will consider a sort of spoiler, so skip ahead maybe 15 seconds if you don't want to know. But there's a lift hill in there in which you stop and then you jolt forwards a few times, like stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. I thought that was pretty cool and unique. But otherwise, the ride, meh. Sixth place is Colossus, one of Intamin's 10 inversion coasters. This is not a coaster I had crazy high expectations for, as it only fell one spot short of where I thought I would rank it, but I was still looking forward to it a little bit, and I came off a little underwhelmed with this one. Let's do a quick overview from start to finish. I liked the station as it wasn't overwhelming, but it still had a cool vibe. But then you get on the train and you realize it kind of sucks. For me, being 6'2", size 15 shoe, I didn't have room for my feet to just be firm on the ground. I had to angle them. And the restraint itself is both bulky and slightly unaccommodating. From there, I would split the coaster into two halves. The first half consists of the drop, a vertical loop, an airtime hill, and a cobra roll. All of these elements were duds to me. Did not feel much of anything. Then you have the second half, back-to-back corkscrews, the famous quad heartline roll, and then another heartline roll for good measure. The back-to-back corkscrews were okay to good. For most of my viewers in the States, it's like Fahrenheit's back-to-back corkscrews at Hershey Park, just less aggressive. After that is the quad heartline roll, and this was by far my favorite part of the ride. Great hang time, and it's just absurd to be doing the same thing for such a long time like this on a roller coaster. I loved it, and I was laughing pretty good during this part for both of my two rides on Colossus. Then you end the ride on yet another heartline roll. It's like adding insult to injury, but in a good way. But for as much as I liked the second half, it was not enough to overcome the extremely underwhelming first half, leaving me overall unimpressed. Next up is Nemesis Inferno, a B&M inverted roller coaster. I seem to be the only one in our group of four that was not a big fan of this coaster. Don't get me wrong, a B&M invert is a B&M invert, so of course it's good, but in terms of B&M inverts, it was just fine to me. Lower tier for me. It's small and it's short. Honestly, I might have been a bigger fan of the theming than I was for the ride itself. This was easily the best queue at Thorpe Park, and I liked the station as well. And the pre-lift through the tunnel was pretty cool, and it added to the experience. I liked that. But then the ride was just kind of whatever to me. It starts with the typical curve drop loop 0G roll combo. And for me, I have a better drop loop 0G roll combo at home, so nothing memorable there. The main aspect of Nemesis Inferno is the interlocking corkscrews, which had to be the highlight for me, but at the same time, there are better B&M invert corkscrews out there, like at my home park, yet again. At the same time, though, I wasn't expecting anything crazy beforehand for Nemesis Inferno, so I can't say I'm surprised or anything. It met my expectations. But then the three other people in my group liked this considerably more than I did for my three rides, so take that as you will. Yet another coaster that dropped one spot from my pre-visit rankings. We have Swarm coming in at fourth. I was really excited to try a new for me B&M Wing Coaster, as the last time I experienced a new for me B&M Wing Coaster was 2016, so quite a bit ago. Despite it dropping a spot from my pre-ranking, this is not the fault of Swarm, as I really liked it. First off, the biggest surprise for me was the fact that the vest restraint did not lock. As it turns out, Thorpe Park went ahead and removed the locking vest restraint this past off season. I had no idea that this could be done, so I hope everyone out there with older wing coasters are taking notes. Six Flags Great America X Flight. Anyways, the station is freaking awesome. Like, I loved it. The facade paired with the audio was fantastic, and having the inline twist go through the facade right over the queue for the right wing was so cool too. Speaking of X Flight, maybe this is home park bias, but if you strip the theming from both X Flight and Swarm, I think X Flight has the slightly better layout. They're actually similar in a weird way, but Swarms feels a little shorter and a little less intense. But as an overall package with the theming, it's a great time, and I really liked it. The hang time between the wing over drop and the inline twist were the highlights for me, as well as the transition into the inline twist. That was pretty intense. Earning bronze is not only the big surprise from the park, but from the trip as a whole, is the Gerstlauer Eurofighter Saw the Ride. This was a classic case of where not knowing everything about a ride beforehand probably helped me think more highly of it. Just like Walking Dead, Saw is not something I have experience with other than knowing about do you want to play a game? But Saw felt much more immersive through its theming, and I was much more interested and engaged with Saw than I was for Walking Dead. The beginning of the ride may be considered spoilers, so if you don't want to hear them, I would go ahead and skip forward maybe 45 seconds for this one. But if you ride in Load 2, you get an extra show scene with Jigsaw. Honestly, I can't really hear what he's saying, but it's still creepy that he's just like right there, and I like it. Once you advance, you have a pretty steep drop while dodging a cool theme set piece above. That's a lot of fun. That's a great visual, and the drop itself is really good. And then right before you come back outside, you have a super slow inline twist that lays on the hang time. I had no idea about this, and I loved it. Also, while you're upside down, there's like this bloody corpse prop on the floor, and it shoots water up, and it lightly hits the riders in the middle seats. Again, I just thought that was so awesome. I had no idea about that. Moving on to the layout proper, this was shockingly good. The drop is 100 degrees, so it's got a bit of a kick. The implement is a little forgettable, but the exit of it is sharp, and eventually you hit a literal ejector hill, which admittedly is not the most comfortable with these restraints, but it's still really awesome and rare for a Eurofighter. When we rode for our three rides, I'm not even sure if the midcourse was tapping us at all. We would just flew straight through the midcourse, and the drop after the midcourse was great. It had awesome airtime when you just flew through there. From there, you enter an absolutely ridiculous dive loop. You take it with so much speed since you weren't slowed down at all by the midcourse, and the dive loop itself is already small on its own, so it's crazy intense and whippy and quick. So, between Saw's theming and the layout, this has to be my favorite Eurofighter besides Shellraiser. And I was not expecting that at all going in. I thought it was just going to be like a standard Eurofighter that only went viral because the name Saw was attached to it. But it's more than just the name theming wise, and the layout is really, really good. 2024 winner right here for sure. Also, side note, row 1 is rougher than row 2 for whatever reason. And like I said, you want low 2. Thank me later. Coming in second is the Intimate Accelerator Stealth. If you recall from my pre-visit video, I was a bit hesitant to put this coaster in second place. I'm very happy to report that after riding it, it rightfully earned that second spot, no questions asked, no hesitation. Let's start with the launch, and let's get this out of the way. Call me biased if you want, but in my unbiased opinion, I don't have much doubt in my mind that Max Force has a faster acceleration. If you've ridden both Max Force and Stealth, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the comments below on which coaster you think has the faster acceleration because I seriously, I think it's Max Force. But by no means does that not make Stealth's launch bad. This is still an excellent launch. Maybe I was still slightly let down since I thought it was going to have more punch than Max Force, or at least, like on par. But this launch is very on par with Accelerator at Knott's Berry Farm, so I still loved it on its own. I like the countdown, and while not really a factor if you're on the ride, the smoke from the back of the train with each launch was a really cool touch. So, if I was ever so slightly disappointed with the launch, how did it still exceed my expectations? Honestly, it's everything else. And that starts with something you may not even think of, but that's the pull up into the top hat. The transition from the straight launch track to the vertical top hat track is absolutely ludicrous in the best way possible. This blew me away for each of my four rides. You are absolutely pinned to your seat with some of the strongest forces I can recall ever experiencing. Seriously, the top hat itself is great too. Ejector going up in the front half of the train with ejector going down in the back half of the train. And then even the ending of the ride surprised me. It has a similar hill that King of Ka at Six Flags Great Adventure has, but the one on Stealth is much better. You're thrown forward aggressively when you crest the hill and start to decelerate. It was funky and maybe slightly uncomfortable, but I still loved it. I'm very happy to report that overall, I was quite impressed with Stealth. And then, of course, to the surprise of no one, I am placing the new for 2024 Mock Rides Hypercoaster Hyperia in first place. Wow, what a great coaster. But it did not start out that way. Hyperia was closed for roughly the first 2 hours of our day, and then once it opened, we got on it fairly early and we were all underwhelmed. But then with each ride we had later in the day, we all liked it a lot more. The cue for this coaster is very bland, but you'll be able to hear a great Imascore track while you wait. It's a very elegant track. It it never tries too hard. It's not like in your face. It's elegant in a way. While the queue is a bit bare, the station was done pretty well. They went with the black and gold with great lights throughout, plus some fog. It was done pretty well. While the pre-lift is often forgotten about, it was still a good time for each ride. I liked it more than the pre-lift for Untamed at Wallaby Holland, which is similar. From there, you climb the lift and come face to face with what could be the best drop in the world. I said it. Absolutely bonkers. Madness. Insanity. Words cannot describe this drop. Definitely on my short list for best drops in the world. After the drop, you hit the almost half loop like turnaround that it's got awesome airtime when you're descending the element. It seems like some people consider this an inversion, but I wouldn't. Either way, it's pretty good. After that, you have an absolutely wicked outer bank turn, and it transitions into a barrel down drop. The airtime on the outer bank was great, in my opinion, and then literally going from that airtime to a downward inversion was sneaky intense. This element as a whole was the perfect amount of insanity because with any more of it, I probably would have thought it was too much. It really pushes the limit, but it doesn't exceed the limit, which I thought was awesome. From there, you hit the giant stall slash dive loop. Honestly, for me, this was a little underwhelming. I don't know, but I felt like the hang time wasn't as great as it should be for an element that is that huge and upside down for that long. It was still good, don't get me wrong, but it's easily my least favorite huge element of the ride. Once you bottom out, you hit the trims, and unfortunately, you hit them pretty hard. And even more unfortunate for someone like me who cares, but the water effect was not working for us. So it's like we hit a huge trim for nothing because it's supposed to look like a splashdown, but now it's just acting like a normal trim, and it kind of stinks. From there, you hit another outer bank, but this one is not nearly as crazy or large as the other one. It's still good, but not great. After that, you hit the brake run. And the way you enter the brake run, you would think you would get some airtime. It's kind of shaped like an airtime hill, but unfortunately, you don't get any when you're sitting in the back, and you only get a little when you're in the front. So, overall, Hyperia, it's nowhere near perfect. It's short in length compared to other hypercoasters. At the same time, though, I was not really begging for another element or two. Of course, I would have loved that, obviously, especially without the trim. But when I hit the brake run for all five of my rides, wanting another element or two never crossed my mind. The trim is a bit of a party killer, like Buzzkill, and the following Outer Bank is whatever compared to the rest of the ride, but everything else is fantastic. One of, if not the best drop in the world, fantastic airtime in multiple spots, some of the most unique sequencing and elements out there right now, especially the Outer Bank barrel roll down drop. It's got good theming, good IMA score, the pros absolutely outweigh the cons, and this was without question my favorite coaster in the park, and one of my favorites on the entire trip. Alright, so now I will move on to my overall thoughts of Thorpe Park and talk about any other rides I rode, of which there was only one other ride I did, which was Ghost Train. And, well, first off, is Ghost Train truly even a ride? Kind of. Fast forward another 45, 60 seconds if you want to be like me and go into this ride completely blind. But this experience is like a haunted maze crossed with a motion simulator. It starts with a pre show, and then you have a motion simulator bit where you're riding a train and there's live actors doing weird stuff in the aisle of the train. And then you get off the motion simulator and you walk through a couple rooms with more actors that are doing like show scenes. They're not like popping up and scaring you, they're like acting. And then you get back on the motion simulator for more weird acting. I don't know. This went on for like 15 minutes, and part of me wishes I had that time back. I've mentioned in the past that I don't really care for haunted mazes, so maybe I just don't appreciate the experience nearly as much as someone else would if they care. If you're an HHN person, you might like it and stuff, but for me, meh. As for the rest of the park, my very first impression was the location. I had no idea that Thorpe Park was essentially on an island, so that was a pretty pleasant surprise. Walking past the turnstiles into the rest of the park, like on that bridge, it was so cool with all the surrounding water, seeing like Hyperia to the left, and even on Hyperia, like climbing the lift. It's so cool seeing all the nearby water and stuff. Overall, I was a fan of the theming. It's nowhere near European parks like Europa Park or Phantasialand, and it's not near like Universal or Disney for the States, but this is the kind of theming that I wish Six Flags had. Take a ride like Stealth, which in the grand scheme of things, it's not themed great, but it has great touches like the launch audio countdown and you got the smoke near the back of the train. Or even Hyperia, like there's virtually no like theming set pieces. I don't even know if I would say Hyperia is like themed. It's more like a great presentation. Like it looks great, the music's great. You have light and fog, the paint pops. Like this is like the little touches I wish Six Flags did. But then even beyond that, there's places where you have pretty good theming, like the queue for Nemesis Inferno or Saw the Ride. So combine the island-like setting, decent greenery, good theming, and I really like the atmosphere overall. The coaster lineup itself is pretty great, I would say. You have an elite coaster, a good launch, you have a couple non like normal sit down coasters with an invert and wing, maybe it's lacking a little in airtime, and it would be nice to have like a beefier family coaster, intermediate coaster, but those are really nitpicks more than anything. I did really like the lineup here. Some other super quick things I thought of. The bathrooms here are very, very nice. I guess they recently just put a lot of effort into renovating them, and it really shows. I did not eat any food here. Nothing was really calling my name. Well, that's a little bit of a lie. I I don't know, for whatever reason, I always eat a bunch of Magnum Classic bars when I'm in Europe, and I had like 3 or 4 at Thorpe Park, but that's not like a food item that's unique to the park. And with that, that's all I could think about that I want to share about my time at Thorpe Park. Overall, I really enjoyed my day here, and it's a great park. Have you been to Thorpe Park? What do you think of their coaster lineup, or anything else about the park? Feel free to let me know in the comments below. And thank you all for checking out the video. Push down, pull up, exit to the right. Hope you enjoyed the video, and go have your greatest day yet. Choo choo, bye!